great. Thank you very much and welcome to this session. We're talking about the India story for the next decade, or should we call it decade as NASSCOM calls it. In the last few months, every time I listen to any global CEO or global business leader, be it a Geeta Gopinath or a Sundar Pichai or a Satya Nadella or an Arvind Krishna, one thing that excites all of them is India's digital public infrastructure, India's tag, digital public goods, call it what you will. But we're really seeing so much of excitement around this, and people believe that this is something unique that India has built, technology rails that India has built in various spheres, and how this could have a game-changing impact. And we've already seen this in some sense. I mean, Jio wouldn't have been Jio without an Aadhaar eKYC. Similar for Zerodha, and many other businesses have benefited from these rails. But if you can give us your perspective on India's story for the next decade from a technology lens, how is digital public infrastructure going to drive it? How do you envision this going forward, Anant?
Okay, so let me begin, and you took a lot of names of the global leaders. I would add Chandra from Tata Sons. He wrote about digital nation some time back, and that was pre-pandemic. So I think there is a lot of awareness and excitement about the opportunity of what digital can do to really accelerate India's progress in the grassroots. I think we've seen how billion-scale platforms have come out of India. UPI, Aadhaar, CoWIN are great examples of how, in adversity, India really pulled out a lot of acceleration. And these are now not just proof of concept, they're proof of scale. These are opportunities and capabilities that many countries would really love to have because they have put India on a different growth trajectory. For anybody who's traveling globally amongst any of us, you feel the lack of UPI when you are transacting in any other part of the world. It's just become so much part of our day-to-day work. And I think more than that, I would also speak about the foundations on which these platforms are built. So there is very strong awareness about data, about the privacy, security, trust principles that a lot of these platforms should have. So I truly believe that digital public goods are a huge acceleration point. And we've just got the story started. You look at all the businesses that are getting built on them, and I really call it make. So you make in India, you've already done that with these platforms. You're making new IP based on these platforms, and now you can take this IP globally and make for the world, which companies like TCS are doing a great job of. So I would really say that there is a very strong momentum that we have in the country with digital public goods. I'll hand it over to Krishnan if you'd like to add.
Thank you, Anant. Chandra, I think that's a great question. In addition to all the points that Anant just made, two other important points that I would like. Typically, countries are endowed with some natural advantages and they'll have some natural problems. The best thing for any country to do is to leverage things that deliver it a natural advantage and ideally also mitigate against the natural disadvantages as a country that one has got. And we can cite many examples. In the interest of time, from India's point of view, it is not a very well endowed country in terms of natural resources, but in terms of manpower, they are very abundant. And so that skilled technology manpower is very abundant in India. So technology is a natural ally for us. And it's also a great natural advantage for India that technology is today the solution for most of the problems, whether you look at it from a country's point of view or a business point of view, or even a planet's point of view. So to bet on technology as a country is a very natural thing for India to do. And as the technology industry here, we couldn't be more delighted that this is how things are timed. That is point number one. Secondly, the natural disadvantage of India is the vast number of people who, and it is not very equitable in terms of access to many of these resources. Right? So how do we take advantage of this technology, which is a natural advantage for India, and it's going to go a long way further, but also design, whenever we are scaling it, we design it in a way that it also helps the less equitable half also benefit from it, rather than let a network effect, which typically comes with a winner-take-all kind of outcome. That would be a disaster for any country. If not a disaster, at least it would be a great opportunity laid to waste. So the best thing about digital infrastructure is that whether you take it in terms of the payment system, the ability to reach the last man and woman in the country, or healthcare, or any other dimension that you take, it has the ability to equitably reach every Indian, regardless of their status and so on, level of access and so on. That the Indian government has that vision, and it's building everything towards equitable and fair access to everybody is the biggest highlight, which I think is one of the reasons why it is attracting attention all over.
Right. In fact, since you said equitable, I think ONDC is an approach to doing that in terms of making more accessible for sellers, small sellers to sell their products online. But Anant, to your point on make, that's a very interesting analogy. And when I think of the make framework, UPI fits right into that. Made in India. Then you have platforms or apps that have come on top of that, which are hugely successful, and they came up just in the last 5 years. If you look at a PhonePe or a Google Pay, and Google Pay, in fact, I think Google cited this example to the US, that this is something that they should be doing. And UPI is now going global. They tied up with Singapore as well last week. But in terms of the end impact, Krishnan spoke about how we should use this to our advantage, to build a more equitable, inclusive society. Do you think this could set off a virtuous cycle where you have more private enterprises building on top of this digital public infrastructure, better competition, better services, bringing down the cost of transactions for people in the country? If you can paint a picture for us on what the end impact is going to be on the ground. We talk about equitable, we talk about inclusion, but how is it going to play out?
So I will maybe quote an example that I just heard and a quote that I just heard from Sri Fadnavis just about half an hour back on the main stage. He spoke about the vision for having 100,000 street vendors having capability to receive payments, and he said that's happened in Maharashtra itself, in Mumbai itself. So to me,
I think the QR code is almost ubiquitous.
Yeah, so to me that's the best place to start, because then you said enterprises, and generally when you say enterprises, people think about big companies. But if a street vendor on a push cart is using that QR code, I think that's where the velocity of money is taking a totally different shape. Today, 2 out of 5 transactions in India are digital. It's estimated that within 5 years, it will be 2 out of 3 transactions in India being digital. And that will lead to a $10 trillion economy moving on digital. So in terms of transactions. So that is a very, very significant scale that you have. And when you have velocity of money increasing in any economy, that drives growth. That's from a pure macroeconomic point of view. So I truly believe that digital payments is at a core of how the Indian growth engine will continue. You referred to ONDC, there are many other aspects as to how commerce will get integrated into this process, and how both goods and services will come into play as we go forward. So I truly believe it's a massive accelerator for the Indian economy.
Right. He spoke about, how the velocity on the user side, right, on the consumer side, how this is not just about big enterprises, but your street side vendor who's using a QR code today, and you can buy everything from tender coconut water to your vada pav. But on the enterprise side, again, are you seeing Indian companies, smaller Indian tech companies leveraging this digital public infra to build on top of it? Or are we again going to see it concentrated between the big tech firms? Because if you look at payments today, Walmart owns PhonePe, Google dominates, and then the third player is possibly Meta, a distant third. So are global companies again building this better than Indian companies? Why are Indian companies not able to leverage their own rails?
So I think it is still fairly early days. I wouldn't say that the final verdict on it is written yet. So it's like I said, this concept of QR code and ubiquitous QR code, and even the street vendors utilizing that is still fairly in early days. And the very fact of digital public infrastructure is that you open source it, make it open, and not be dependent on any few companies from getting concentrated and getting the network effect, winner take all effect. So that's the whole fundamental principle. Whether you take ONDC or the UPI, the fundamental underlying principle is that.
Amazon is joined the ONDC.
Yeah, so that's a fantastic win, in my opinion. So the point is, ONDC on the one hand will make sure that even the mom and pop shops will not lose out, or at least will have an opportunity to compete effectively against the big ones. At the same time, it will also give a lot of opportunity for the smaller logistics companies who may or may not want to play ball with the bigger vendors to participate in parts of the ecosystem rather than having to think only about somebody who will control the entire ecosystem and having to play as a secondary player in the overall ecosystem. The ability for each company to play in their specialized segment and be able to offer specialized products or services that will be completely controlled by them, while in the process serving a whole value chain which is not controlled by any single entity. I think that's the genius behind this whole idea.
Right. And is this also about, empowering people on how they use their own data? The way the account aggregator system, for example, has been designed, or the way DigiLocker has been designed, where you are given loans based on your own record of payments. They are trying to reduce red tape. So are digital public goods also geared towards empowering people to use their own data to get those financial services that they would have otherwise had a hard time accessing?
No, absolutely. I think that's the difference between even the way regulation is thinking about privacy and security in India, let's say compared with GDPR, which was amongst the first set of regulations that came through in the world. I think the real thinking around consent for data is really at the cutting edge in India in terms of how everybody should be empowered to think about their data as to the consent, privacy, the trust, the security around it. Coming back a little bit to your point earlier, and I would say the Indian banking system is a huge enabler in terms of everything that is happening on digital payments. In the front end, you might see some companies, but at the end of the day, those transactions are getting squared by Indian banks. The State Bank of India and many of the Indian banks are actually really squaring that transaction. Now, as you even look at the digital currency coming into play, and the Indian government has already announced the plans around it, I think it's again going to be very significantly powered by Indian banks. Both the public sector and the private sector banks. So I truly believe, as Krishnan said, this is early days. Many parts of the ecosystem are coming together. The good news, as he said, is no single company actually has an end-to-end ownership of the pipe. There are multiple companies coming together, which is a great way to think about the future. It's a very much disaggregated but very seamless when it works together.
Right. Since you mentioned the e-rupee, if you can share your thoughts on how that's going to be a game changer, because the jury's still out. People are wondering, why do we need this when you already have UPI? But I think the RBI has initiated a wholesale as well as a retail pilot. Your thoughts on how this could be a game changer?
I won't be able to crystal gaze on that one because the entire world is looking for an answer for digital currency. I think about this as innovation. In innovation, if you had 100% clarity on what will succeed and what will not succeed, then it will be very simple and a lot of people would be able to do it. But I think the opportunity to try many different things in different parts of the ecosystem and let them play out is something that India has done very well. Because frankly speaking, you might have even argued, why do you need UPI? There is a very strong payment mechanism that exists. But it came in and it changed the way in India worked. So I'm looking forward to use cases that will come through, and I truly believe in the entrepreneurship in the country. They'll find use cases.
Krishnan, TCS is a company that's managed to crack the code when it comes to the India technology market, and every day we see these tweets going viral about user experience, for instance, at the Passport Seva Kendra, whether it's getting a passport, getting a renewed passport in 24 hours, 48 hours. You've been able to do this at scale. What opportunities do you see from the digital public infra ecosystem? What role can companies such as yours play here? Anything that excites you particularly?
I'm obviously awesome, proud of being a TCSer. Okay. And I'd love to speak about TCS a lot. But today, here on the stage, I'm here as a chairman of NASSCOM. So I'll not talk specifically about TCS, but more broadly. So the India as a market, I would say, is also a very powerful force. In addition to the vision behind the digital public infrastructure and so on, it is also a very big market, which is why internationally, how we can leverage infrastructure such as the digital public goods to be able to reach the lost Indian with our products and services is one key thing that's on all of our minds, right? So from that point of view is why India is such a great market, which is why companies like TCS, we have been able to imagine how best can we serve the Indian from a customer experience point of view, right? The Passport Seva Kendra that you alluded to. In terms of experience for the customer, who is a common man and woman, it is an order of magnitude different compared to what it was before the Passport Seva Kendras came on board. Similarly, if you take the account aggregator framework that we earlier talked about, there again, one element is the advantages that Anant talked about. The other is also the supreme customer experience. Right? Because today, if you go and ask for a loan, as an individual or as an enterprise, the onus of delivering the KYC, go get a notarized copy of this, get a this certificate, that certificate, so many things are there. The onus is on the customer actually. The customer has to do all of that to have the honor and privilege of giving the vendor the privilege of the business, right? Which is not how it should be. The customer should be the king and everything else should come to them. Companies that can conceptualize a business model in which this superior customer experience, treating the customer as a king and getting their products and services to them with the least amount of botheration for the customer will be a huge thing for India, because especially the common people in the lower estate of society, they are simply not used to being treated well, even if they are a customer. Right? If we can deliver that experience in terms of the market potential for so many goods and services, it's just phenomenal. Which is why I think India as a market is a very powerful force.
Yeah, you mentioned Passport Seva Kendra. I think Kogan is also a brilliant example
Absolutely.
of that. You get your vaccination certificate in 5 seconds, which is incredible. Anand, would you like to add this on the opportunity for enterprises?
No, absolutely. And I think I am seeing across sectors, and it's not just in the fintech or the financial services. You look at consumer companies, you look at manufacturing companies, you look at even the government services in many parts are changing the interface in terms of how they interact with many of these services. I think for many of us who travel a lot, the recent innovation even on Digi Yatra, I think is a very good example of how user experience is being thought through. And yes, there is scope for improvement. A lot can be done better. But to me, all of these are good initiatives to really ease the day-to-day transaction for every person.
Right. You know, we're also in a year when India has assumed G20 presidency. In fact, we had a big meeting in Bengaluru recently with all, top names in the world of finance. How can we use technology, diplomacy as a tool to increase India's heft when it comes to global leadership? What are your thoughts on this?
First,
Please.
so the manner in which I would probably think about it, there are many ways to go about doing that. The first thing that I would probably think about is that countries, today if you take the financial dimension, the richer countries have the ability to offer aid to poorer countries and in some form help them and so on. And that is the manner in which they do their diplomacy. Diplomacy is often the means to an end. So richer countries use money, finance as a means to the end that they seek to achieve diplomatically. Technology can be the tool for India, is how I think about it. If you provide, instead of giving financial aid, you can give technological aid. For example, with digital public infrastructure as a key asset that we can lend to somebody. I think that can be a great tool for strategic leverage, diplomatic ends to the means that are the means to the end that India seeks to achieve from diplomatic means. That's probably how I would think about it. There are many use cases in terms of how this can be done. But fundamentally, I would think of technology aid as a mechanism for diplomatic advantages India can look at.
Interesting. Anand?
So, a couple of things here, and I'll maybe summarize it in a phrase first. I truly believe tech leads India. India leads tech across the world in many ways. And I think the decade can really help us lead diplomacy. So let me just walk through each of those three phases. If I talk about tech leads India, I think what we see in the IT services industry of India, which we talked yesterday, is more than half of the services exports from India, is a very good example of how tech is very relevant for India. We spoke a lot about the startup ecosystem in the country, which again is a very strong enabler of how tech is leading even employment creation and so on in the country. Now, turn it the other way around, India leads tech globally. If you look at, there's a lot of talk around AI, but AI is also being created by developers. India is the source for tech talent globally. It's a known fact that we have amongst the largest tech talent globally. But even in AI, if you really look at it now, it's amongst the largest AI talent globally. So if the entire world has to think about AI differently, then India can truly lead that tech capability for the world. And therefore, to the point that decade can really lead diplomacy. In the G20 conversations, as you just referred, I think a lot of countries are now coming to India and experiencing what technology is doing. NASSCOM is a big partner to many of the G20 initiatives, where we are now demonstrating the prowess of what is being done with technology in India and how many other countries can work with those examples, not just as proof of concept, but proof of scale.
It's good that you mentioned AI, because AI was my next question on the opportunities that you see here for India. I think they're already talking about regulation of AI. IT is thinking about on those lines. But what opportunities do you see?
So, as I actually mentioned in the same room yesterday, today AI is ubiquitous. We may or may not know about it. Right? Even in terms of the price that either an Amazon or even any of the Indian players display on their websites when we go and purchase something is actually determined by AI, believe it or not. Right? So, one is on the commercial side of it, how AI has become ubiquitous in terms of being able to enable many aspects of business. Similarly, when it comes to digital public infrastructure as an example, AI, just by the sheer virtue of the fact that India is the treasure trove of 1.4 billion people worth of data, the ability for us to learn from the data, train machine learning models in terms of being able to glean intelligence from it and being able to actionable insights from it is a phenomenal opportunity. And I think that will, again, it is very early days in terms of what can be done with it. It has to be carefully thought through because it also involves a level of privacy that has to be ensured before taking advantage of the capabilities that AI as a technology can offer. Still early days, but huge potential for sure.
In fact, Anant, if you can weigh in on that, how do we balance the need for these robust innovations and tech advancements with the need for data privacy?
So, I spoke about that earlier also in terms of the way data consent, privacy, trust is being thought in the country. First of all, I truly believe India has the potential to be the data capital of the planet. One is to start with the tech talent that we have in the IT services industry that we have already. A lot of data is being processed in the country. That is global data being processed in the country. But also with all the conversation we had around digital payments, we are generating a lot of data. Every transaction is a data point. So as you generate more transactions, more data is getting generated. Even everything that's happening on e-health, e-education, e-governance, all of those are data generation points. So when all of that data comes into play, you have the opportunity to then work with that data and create artificial intelligence or machine learning. To the point that Krishnan mentioned, all of us actually use machine learning and artificial intelligence around us. Today, I can tell you my typing speed on the phone has gone up dramatically compared to 5 years back. and I won't credit my skills on it, because I think the software there is predicting, hey, you normally write this way, so this might be the next word that you might be right, and is correcting all my spelling mistakes as I write them. So I think a lot of us experience that, and we feel that's a very good productivity tool because it's allowing me to do more and making sure I do it right. So that is really the way AI comes into play. It is a co-pilot around each of us that allows us to do our things, whatever we are doing, in a better way. So in general, I would say there is a good architecture baseline that is being set up in how this public data is getting managed, and also the business models that are coming up on it are continuously being asked to think about it. Just one analogy I would take, because before the tech industry I used to be in the industrial world, and all of us understand about climate and environment. If you really look at all the climate laws and the environmental laws, they really had a very strong lag to all the manufacturing capacity that happened on the planet, maybe about even 30 to 50 years at times. But in the digital realm, I think that lag will be much smaller, but there will be a lag. So let's not believe that everything that we do today is already thought through and regulation will be up there to manage it. But very soon it will come. The only difference being, in the manufacturing world, it came in the lifetime of whoever succeeded. In the digital world, it will come in our own lifetimes. So you may start a business model today, but it will show up pretty quickly in terms of how it should be managed. But that's the way I would think about it. If you apply first principles, then you should be good with the regulation that you may face in the next 5 to 10 years.
Right. So far we spoke about the good things. Let me ask you to play the devil's advocate and tell me, what are the 1 or 2 things that we need to get out of the way so that we can leverage all these advantages we have in the technology sphere, in the digital public goods sphere, something that needs to be done, or something that is holding up the pace of innovation and disruption?
Sure. So I will again go back to what I said first, right? The network effect and the winner-take-all characteristics of some of these digital propositions. That is the blessing as well as the curse. It is a blessing because that is what will attract businesses to come to India, right? Because they will see a huge profit potential,
the scale,
and so on. So that is what will attract. So we need to make sure that there is enough of a profit pool available as a promise to for companies to come to India. But at the same time, we have to be careful enough not to make sure that the network effects are taken to the extreme in a country of 1.4 billion people. Then, from an Indian society point of view, it can be a very big problem. Therein lies the conundrum. We need to walk that thin line between how to make it attractive enough for businesses to come, make in India, invest in India, build for India, and build in India for the world. But at the same time, not make it a
so that they can get a disproportionate share.
Exactly. It has to be a win-win partnership, and it should not be a win-lose partnership. That's the key thing, both as an opportunity and as a threat that we need to very carefully work on.
So, to address the question very directly, hey, listen, what are the risks? What can go wrong? It's obvious, and it is around us all the time. We've seen this in the war that's happening in Europe right now. That it's not just a physical war. It's also a very big war on digital signals. And in fact, the digital war started before the physical war in terms of how you can really go and look at the sovereignty of the country. And there could be state actors who come in and start challenging that sovereignty of the country. As a nation here, there is enough and more that we've spoken of as to how India needs to raise its cyber defenses as you go along. So I think cyber security, cyber defense is going to be a big risk as we continue to have a more digital world. It's inescapable, but it's not something that is something that we can't work on, and there's a lot of good work that is happening here. And that's where I believe there'll be a lot of new jobs also. Because cyber security, working on trust, will be the new kinds of professions that will be coming up in a very big way. So I do believe that's a new skill set that every one of us will have to develop. Today, You get, even in our day-to-day lives, you get advice on, hey, listen, just don't download any app or just don't start sharing information on any app. Today, it's still done as it's a nice thing to do. I think very soon it will become habit and it will become a precaution that every one of us will take in how we conduct our digital lives. So to me, that awareness as well as skill sets will increase in general in the ecosystem.
Right, I'm going to wrap by asking each of you to make one big prediction for the next decade for India. And maybe we'll meet a decade later to see if it's panned out. Or it might pan out sooner than that.
10,000 unicorns.
I hope they are profitable.
With that,
We said
10,000 unicorns.
10,000 unicorns.
hopefully profitable unicorns.
Profitable unicorns, yeah.
So I think we'll get to the $1 trillion digital economy faster than what everybody is anticipating in India. That's my bet, because the curve of growth is something that will accelerate much faster than it's being anticipated, and it's been proven many a time in India. If you just look at how we saw some of the telecom revolution happening in the country, a lot of it happened way faster. If you just took macroeconomic models of the world and applied them to India, it happened much faster. And I was there 20 years back thinking about it. I can say today that this $1 trillion economy is going to show up much faster.
On that note, thank
Maybe
you
I
very
can take
much.
one more
Sure.
as well.
Are you trying to reduce the number of unicorns?
No. Call it a wish list, but the most equitable society leveraging technology.
Great. On that note, thank you very much, Anant and Krishnan. And thank you for the audience.
Thank you so much for the feedback.
For more interesting content, like, comment and subscribe to our NASSCOM YouTube channel.